Welcome to the Life Makeovers podcast. My name is Cindy D. Whitmer, and I am the Midlife Makeover Coach, helping you turn your midlife into your best life, one step at a time. Through powerful conversations, my own midlife roller coaster story, and over 3 decades of helping people transform their lives through counseling and coaching, I am on a mission to help you create your own definition of success and happiness. Thank you for being here. Good morning, everybody, to the Life Makeovers podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. And it's your very lucky day today because I have a special guest with me. Her name is Linda Dieffenbach, and I have met her through the Wellness Universe, which is an organization that is home to thousands of people who all support your wellness in your life. And Linda happens to be a personal transformation coach and holistic healer. And one of her specialties is working with people who are dealing with trauma, the effects of that, and helping them navigate and find new ways of living and being, even though they've been through traumatic experiences. And so I'm very excited to have her here with me today. But before we roll into one of our favorite subjects, Linda, is there anything else you'd like our audience to know about you right now?
No, I think that covers it well enough. Yeah, so I think we should just roll into the conversation.
Okay. Well, her business name is Wellness in Harmony, and you can find out more about her and what she could do for you at wellnessinharmony.com. But I'll have that all in the show notes for you as well. So make sure and check it out. And so when we were talking about getting together today, one of the things we thought about exploring was the impact of the patriarchal culture on women. Now, I'm going to say right off, Linda, I don't know about you, but I love men. I have many men I love in my life, and I am not an anti-man person, but we're talking about something bigger, aren't we? We're talking about a cultural trend. We're talking about environments we may have grown up in and so forth. So will you explain how the patriarchal culture has influenced women, especially in our generation, and how it has influenced their behavior and their beliefs and so on and so forth? Like, what would you like to start us off with on that?
So first, I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast, but also for pointing out, like, this is not about man bashing at all. When you talk about the patriarchy, it's really important to understand that the patriarchy affects all of us in a rather toxic way, and it has its purposes too. Because it does carry that masculine energy of structure that has an essential element to the world, but men are deeply affected by the patriarchy and women are deeply affected by the patriarchy and the negative influences that it is, because it really affects how we view ourselves in the world. So yeah, it absolutely is not against or anti-man, but it's more about what this overarching system or structure is that's been in place in our culture for centuries. And that piece, for one, is really important to understand, because this is something that has been infused into our culture and into our lives for a very long time. And at the foundation of the patriarchal culture is what is a power structure. And in the patriarchy, it's a power over, power under structure rather than a power with structure.
Okay.
So
I like how you said that. A patriarchal, it's power over to under versus side by side, or
right.
Yeah,
power with. So
power.
I have power, you have power, and it's perfectly acceptable for us to have power together.
That's not what this is.
No, patriarchy is about, one of the elements of patriarchy. I don't want to be too overarching there, but one of the main structure elements of the patriarchal structure is power over. So I dominate you. And this is seen throughout cultures, in political systems and economic systems and religious systems, where it is about I have control and you do not. I have power and you do not. How do I control the masses? And that control of the masses isn't just controlling women, it's controlling men too. It's controlling, minorities and marginalized groups, so it's also like a hierarchy, so who has the money, who has the power, those are the ones who have the say in what happens in the world. And then the rest of us are left stripped of power.
Okay, so it's kind of like societies where there are classes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the people with the most money are the people with the most power. But in the patriarch, so who's on top? Who's got power over everybody? Does this just mean there's an attitude that men have, the white man has power, or is this just, I mean, I'm not trying to get political or anything, but just will you explain a little bit more who's got the power then in a traditional patriarchal culture?
So in a traditional patriarchal culture, it is men that are the ones who are in power.
Mm-hmm.
And more specifically, it is men who have certain level of status, which can be achieved oftentimes through financial status, of course. So the people who have money are the ones who are considered in power, or the people who simply have control of things, control of assets, control of the government, control of corporations and resources.
Okay. And then how does this affect women?
Well,
the list is long, I know. We only have one podcast, at least so far, to explain
right.
it, but how do you think this affects?
So in a very one of the biggest ways that it affects women is that women are brought into and raised in a society, in a culture that is not designed for us to thrive. It is designed for us to be subservient. It is designed for women to be oppressed. So we do not have the same access, the same resources, the same ability to have power as men within that structure. And that's been a huge part, of course, the feminist movement, where we've been actively working to claim power in this world.
Sure.
So as just a highlight, it was only 50 years ago that we could get a credit card or a bank account without having a male sign for us.
Oh my gosh.
Think about that. Like that's within our lifetime.
In our lifetime. Yeah. I kind of forgot about that. And that's such a little thing, it seems. I mean, for us to be able to get a credit card, that should have been a no-brainer, right?
Right. But money is power. You have power, you have control, you have money, you have access to resources. Think about that. So it's a very profound symbol of oppression by not allowing a woman to have access to money other than through her husband, because it forces dependency.
Well, yeah, not all women want to have husbands or do have husbands or even want a husband. I mean, I remember when my ex-husband's grandfather died. This would have been in 1990-ish. She didn't know how to write a check.
Yeah.
She did not know. She had to learn how to write a check or else have her sons take over her bank account. That was the husband's, who is now dead.
Right.
So that was just one generation ago, 2 generations ago, I guess. But
and it was not uncommon.
no.
And the level of financial resources that women had depended very much on their spouse and the partnership that they had with their spouse. So it was very easy for a woman in a marriage to be strongly controlled, and it still can be that way. I mean, that's how financial abuse happens in domestic violence situations, is the woman is cut off from her resources, and that's how you keep her trapped in a relationship, because she doesn't have the ability to take herself and her children out and get a new home, get a job, get food and insurance and all of the things that they need. So they're stuck.
Well, and as we know, women tend to make less money than men, even in the same professions, like even
Still.
same education, same professions. So how do we behave differently because we are in this model? that there's still traces of this going around our culture?
So we have these deeply ingrained patterns that are, some of it stems through trauma and toxic conditioning that comes from the patriarchal culture. Some of it is very much like deeply ingrained ancestrally, like it is in our DNA as women, where we carry certain survival patterns and tendencies that keep us disempowered, that keep us from being able to access our internal resources or even recognize and identify them. And we essentially, we internalize messaging that's given to us. So we interpret the world by the lens of our own self-worth and our own value. So when we are told something, we're taught something, we have an experience, it becomes part of our identity rather than just information. And so, for example, we have a lot of really ingrained beliefs about our own value and our own self-worth that hold us back in many, many ways. And even women who are very like successful in their careers have these beliefs ingrained in them that hold them back in their relationships, hold them back in, their ability to feel good about themselves, their ability to take care of themselves. So there's a lot of belief structures that we have deeply ingrained where we believe that we are not enough, or we are too much, that we're bad, that we're crazy. There's a lot of crazy making in the world, or we're failures in some way, we're inferior in some way, we're just not good enough, we don't matter. So many of these beliefs are just deeply ingrained into our psyche and into our core being that it hinders us from really being able to blossom and grow and be successful in a way that's meaningful, in a way where we're able to actually feel like we're living in alignment with our soul, in a way that we feel like we're really happy in the world. And so, for example, in relationships, and this is actually in multiple levels of relationships, but I'll just hone in on partner relationships for this. We have a strong tendency to lose ourselves in relationships, abandon ourselves, give up our power in our relationships, and step into people pleasing and caretaking roles where we put the other person's needs in front of ourselves. And this, going back to the patriarchy, this is a survival strategy. Because think about it, for years, we were 100% dependent on our partners to survive.
Yeah.
So we had to learn how to make sure that they were happy so that we didn't get abandoned and left on the street to die, basically.
Yeah, so this leads to what I call classic female training, where we serve to please, to love, because it's our job. And biologically speaking, you're saying, I think, that it is also a survival mechanism.
Very much so.
Way back when, and still sometimes now, and therefore it's ingrained in our culture, we need men, quote unquote, we need men to survive. So we have to take care of them, please them, do what they say, whatever.
Yeah, and this has been ingrained in us for centuries to the point where it's basically our instinct. So is to be very tuned into others. And there's an element of that that speaks into just like the mother instinct, but this is more of the wounded expression of that, where we have this instinctual tendency to need to caretake and need to make sure that everyone else is good, everyone else is happy, everyone else is okay, because if they're not, then I panic. Yeah. I get really anxious. Something's wrong. I have to do something. So everybody else's happiness is dependent on me, which is an incredible burden to carry.
Okay. And so are we conscious of this, and are men conscious of this, or are we all just unconsciously operating from these ancestral patterns?
For the most part, we're not conscious of it. It's patterns that we just grow into. you know, I see there's a lot of women saying,
we witnessed it growing up, likely. And so we model it
mhm.
without consciously understanding where that came from generations before us. Is
Yeah,
that fair
we,
to say?
yeah, we're also taught it. You know, we're taught to take care of. You know, we become responsible for taking care of our siblings. We become responsible for taking care of our parents. You know, taking care of others in some way. This is shifting, of course, is what I'm about to say, but there is also, you know, as I was growing up, and well before that, if there was a career that a woman was going to walk into, what was it? What were you
Nursing,
encouraged to do?
teaching, secretary, nursing, teaching. Have I said them all? Motherhood,
Motherhood, yeah, social work, you know, social service,
social work.
helping professions.
Yeah, helping. Oh my, you're
Yeah.
right.
So we were told in so many ways, and in, you know, through media and everything else, that that was our role. That's what we're meant to be. That is our purpose in life, is to be caretake other people and put their needs before our own. So it is, and it's also amplified through trauma experiences. So there's a lot of women that I work with, for example, who had lived in really chaotic home environments, whether it was through violence between the parents or violence within the home towards them, you know, substance abuse and things like that, that just created chaos in the environment. And they took on the role of caretaker to try to just manage the chaos, to try to make sure everybody else was okay so that things didn't blow up.
Keep it safe as possible, and yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's multifaceted, it's deeply ingrained, and even when we're doing our inner work and we're really gaining our self-awareness, there's so many subtle nuances into how we do this, that are very sneaky. And I just, there was a session I did recently with a woman who, her husband, so she was outside dealing with the kids. You know, they were outside, I think they were like swimming or playing in water or whatever, and there was somebody in the neighborhood who was not safe. And she called her husband, from, he was working inside, called her husband to have him come help.
Uh-huh.
And his response was that she should be able to do this on her own, essentially. And we're talking about this, and she's sharing that, you know, like, I know he was stressed, and I know that this, and I know that, and, you know, like, it's okay. And do you see what's happening there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they both had their stressors, they both had their concerns. And there's much more to this dynamic, of course, but there was so much, so like there was, they both had their problems and their things that were really important to them. And what we have a tendency to do, and this is so subtle sometimes, is like we negate our own needs and our own circumstances, in lieu of somebody else's needs. And sometimes it's obvious, sometimes like big things we might be really aware of it, but these like little subtleties where we just like, we defer.
Yeah. I've done it many
Mhm.
times.
We probably all have.
Many times.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
So it can be very insidious.
Yeah. And how does it affect our health, our mental health and our physical health?
Well, it can create, it can affect our health in a lot of different ways. If you look at, you know, just the energy system in the body,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain certain parts of our body, certain energy systems or chakras that are specifically related to self-care, self-nurturing, love of self, self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever it is that we primarily carry these patterns in our body is often where disease can show up. So for example, if we don't express ourselves, we don't speak up for ourselves, we don't advocate for ourselves and our needs, or allow ourselves to step into the expression that we, want to bring out into the world. We control ourselves through our voice. So that can turn into chronic issues within the throat, bronchitis, just chronic colds, thyroid issues, things of that nature. Most women have a lot of issues in their sacral chakra, which is connected to our reproductive system. So we have endometriosis, PID, just painful periods and difficult cycles, difficulty, having children, all sorts of problems that manifest down there. And that is, for one, where we start developing our self-identity, is in that center. That is also our center of nurturing. So how we nurture self, how we nurture others. And there's oftentimes a disconnect there because we nurture others, we over nurture others, we under nurture ourselves. And also it's our center where we start, like, where boundaries come into play. And yeah. So and oftentimes for women, we don't have strong boundaries for so many reasons. And for a very large percentage of us, unfortunately, our boundaries have been shattered through sexual violence, which just further impacts that area.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. Wow.
So, and then, also can manifest in anxiety, depression, so many different ways that it manifests, just depending on how we internalize and live through the ways that we've been indoctrinated.
This conversation is so important, Linda, because I think when people think of the patriarchy or a patriarchal culture, that, pardon the way I'm going to say this, but I think they think it's just a bunch of white rich assholes who run the corporations and the government, and just think they're all that, and that maybe women don't get paid the same, and then that's about where it stops. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's it. Like, that's what it is. And what I hear you saying is these are deeply ingrained relationship dynamics, very specific behaviors in our day-to-day lives that we may be completely unconscious of, and that it's biologically based, because historically women relied on men for centuries, really up until the 70s, the 1970s or 1980s. Women were primarily dependent on men, either their fathers or their husbands or their older brothers or their uncles, whoever their primary men were in their lives, for everything, anything, because they just were not allowed to take care of themselves, like you said, in these very basic ways, even getting a credit line to get a house or get a credit card or a job, or that paid enough to whatever. So this is much deeper than just, who's running the company.
Oh, it is much deeper. I mean, it really is pervasive in our culture, and it bleeds into every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our self-image, our ability to feel like we're even allowed to have power. And what's really difficult too in breaking out of this pattern, both collectively and personally, is that the level of indoctrination is so pervasive that we knock ourselves down and we knock each other down all the time. And the culture, so the response when you push against something that is ingrained in a culture, in a system, in any fashion, there's automatic pushback. This is just kind of how systems work, because there's a pushback to try to maintain equilibrium. So if you look at the feminist movement, for example, there has been tremendous pushback against women who are trying to break the cycle and shift the culture and claim some power, to the point where when I was in school, I went back to school in my late 20s to get my degree in social work, and I was sitting in a class. There was probably about 30 to 40 people in the class, mostly women, 2 men.
Of course.
And what's that?
Of course, it was social work.
Right, yes. But the professor asked us, how many of you are feminists? Guess how many people raised their hands?
I am scared to guess. How many, Linda? Tell us.
4. The 2 men, myself, and 1 other woman.
The 2 men.
Yes.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. Okay.
Well, they're going into social work, so they obviously have a little bit of
they have
context in there. They're connected with their feminine essence. Yeah.
So, and how are you defining feminism?
She didn't define it. She just asked the question.
Okay, I see. Wow.
So
very few.
now,
Actually.
how I define feminism, excuse me, is just the belief that women are equal and should have access to the same rights as everybody else.
Yeah.
You know.
Boom.
So
forward. Pretty
like
reasonable, isn't it?
Right. Like I love Maya Angelou's quote on feminism, where she's like, of course I'm a feminist. I've been a female for a long time. Why wouldn't I be on my own side? You know, like it's,
oh gosh,
you know,
I love her. Yeah,
but that speaks to, yeah, she's all wonderful. But that speaks to that pervasive indoctrination where when women started to claim their power, wanting to have freedoms, wanting to have rights, wanting to be able to get jobs outside of the traditional jobs and outside of the home, there was a huge backlash against those women. And there was a huge, for lack of a better term, media push, a marketing push to make them wrong and shame them so that women would not feel safe trying to step into their power. And as an example of this,
wow,
think about any woman trying to climb the corporate ladder, trying to step into a position of power, whether it's through politics or corporation or, just in some other way where they're gaining notoriety and power. What is the most common thing that people say about her? She must have slept her way there. So they call her a whore.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Because that's the only way she could get there.
Right.
It wasn't because she's intelligent or kind or
Capable
educated or in touch with the basic, humankind,
mm-hmm.
needs of humankind.
Yeah, it's not like she's skilled, powerful, creative, has her own genius and strengths to bring to the table. No, she must be a whore. But what that tells us, so when you hear that every time, think about any time you've heard that in, whether it was in a corporate job or, in the media or something, what was the message that it said to you about what's going to happen if you try to claim your power?
Yeah.
You were going to become not just picked on, not just kind of tried to knock down or, ridiculed in some way, completely debase you and everything that you have by saying you must be a whore. So it is insidious, it's powerful, and it's still very pervasive. But we internalize it. We may not overtly think about that messaging. We see it, we hear it, and we don't really think about it. But the internal message is that it's not safe for me to have power. It's not safe for me to be seen. It's not safe for me to step out in the world because I'm going to be labeled as a whore.
Yeah.
And my life is going to be picked apart. If I had a relationship with this guy over there or this person over there, if my life is going to be picked apart. Scary.
Well, yeah. And I mean, we've had men in our history with having outright affairs and, you know, sexual activity that's known, and it hasn't seemed to hurt anybody's reputation. Like, I mean, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, I mean, anytime. I'm not talking about one particular person.
No. I mean, you look at, you know, speaking of one particular person, like look at Kennedy.
Yeah.
He was a very known pervasive womanizer, and he was
Yeah.
idolized.
And absolutely
Idolized.
by this
Yes.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example of someone who, yeah, did not seem, his career did not seem wavered by his personal behavior.
Nope. Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's distressing. Okay, so what are we? It's
See if we
all
can
really
turn.
distressing. Well, and I've always, every time it's time to go vote again, I think of all the women who changed that story and made it possible for us to vote. But literally, some of them died so we could vote.
Yes.
They were killed because they were trying to beat the system, you
Yes.
know, to make it possible for women to have an equal say in voting.
Yes.
So thank you, women, for that. Okay, so let's shift and talk about, you know, how do we begin to change this? How do we change this? Even just, you know, in my life, in my house, if I'm a woman listening right now, you know, and just to live in my life in 2024, which is the time of this recording, how do women in midlife change this trajectory personally and professionally? What do we do that is powerful and meaningful in our own lives, do you think? Do you have suggestions or ideas around that?
Yeah. So I want to start this off with saying, you know, as we've been discussing how ingrained and deep this runs, there is no quick fix to this. So as
No.
much as it would be nice for us to like you know, snap our finger, wave our magic wand, or wiggle our nose and make it all just like
Wouldn't that be great?
women have power. But we don't have that. So it really
like to
does.
acknowledge too that it's getting better. It gets better. It's gotten
Yes.
better. I mean, we
We
are
have,
making strides already, for sure, and have. So let's be honest about that too, because
yes, we have absolutely come a long way.
I'm certainly
So,
happy I live now versus, you know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. I mean, in this way.
right. Yeah, there absolutely has been a lot of progress in this area, and we still have a ways to go. But
Sure.
that progress, as you said, definitely needs to be acknowledged because it's important to recognize that progress is possible.
Yes.
So thank you for that. So the starting point in making change, whether you want to make change in your life or make change in the world in the broader picture, always starts here. It always starts with you. And
Sure.
looking at what you can do and what you do, like what your patterns, what your history is, and the way you show up in the world. And it does start oftentimes with doing that deeper inner work, that, you know, doing the trauma work, looking at your history and saying, okay, what has happened in my past that is affecting the way I show up in the world now? What is limiting me? What is slowing me down? What are the inherent beliefs that I carry about these concepts, these bigger concepts that we've been talking about within the patriarchy, about women, about power and power dynamics? But again, going back to the self, is what are my patterns? What are the things that keep showing up in my life day in and day out? What are the things that I keep doing in my relationships that are not serving me? So like for myself, for example, I was certainly a caretaker. You know, I would go out and I would give up my power to partners and to corporations that I worked for and people that I worked with. I would give up my power and I would dive into like, okay, where do they need help? What can I do for them? How can I take care of them? That was a very toxic pattern. And, you know, I work as a healer, so I still am a caregiver, but it's changed from I need to fix things, I need to control things, I need to make things better. I need to make you better so I feel better, kind of a dynamic. It's changed from that into, um, you know, what are ways that I can support you in whatever way you need right now, and just being okay with them being a mess and not feeling I need to change anything, but just being a support system. But anyway, I digress. But like in that dynamic, you know, what are those patterns? What are these chronic things that are going on in my life that don't work for me? Because the things that aren't working for you are the things that will tell you where your work lies.
Well, yeah, and I think part of the awareness is going to be for some women to go, oh, actually, I have been overgiving and over functioning either in the office or at home or wherever. And that's why I'm exhausted, because I'm at the bottom of my to-do list, or I'm not even on it, because I think my to-do list is serving everyone else.
Mhm.
And so just getting that awareness that what if our biggest responsibility was just to take responsibility for our own lives and our own joy,
Yeah,
our own fulfillment. I mean, period. Like if we just did that,
the world would change.
things would really change, wouldn't they?
Yeah, it would. And there's one of the things one of my mentors, Elizabeth Frediani, said that always resonated deeply with me is that every act of healing is a political act, because everything that we do to take care of ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to heal our wounds and strengthen ourselves resonates and ripples out into the world. It ripples out into our families, it ripples out into our community, it ripples out into the greater whole and the collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, you know, for those of us who are kind of tweaked in that mindset of I've got to take care of everybody else, guess what? Taking care of you will do that.
I say to clients all the time, what's best for you is best for all. What's best for you is best for all. So if we can adopt that mantra of what's best for me is best for all, that not only changes that dynamic of service, but it actually puts new meaning behind really lifting the self up. It's actually such a good thing. It'd be
Yeah,
good for the whole wide world if women stepped up everywhere.
yeah,
Really, just imagine the world. Wow. Really.
yeah. And here's a really, you want a starting place?
Yeah.
A really important starting place is tuning into yourself. Just one, just tuning into yourself, actually being able to be present with yourself
Okay.
and start asking yourself the question, what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want? What do I need? And when you ask this question, what's really important is that you're listening in your heart. You're listening to your soul. You're not listening to that clamor in the head that's going, well, you should do this, and you should go to the gym more, and you should do this more, and you should do this, and you should not eat that, and you should do this. Like, that's not the kind of want I'm talking about. It's listening to your soul, listening to your heart. Like, what at the core of my being do I want? And for a lot of women, I want to acknowledge this because I want to normalize it and make sure, you know, make it okay. We don't know how to listen to that. And when we first start, we just kind of hear crickets, and that is okay. Just keep going in, quieting yourself, listening to yourself, tuning into your heart space, and asking that question, what is it that I want? And give yourself some time for the answer to come, because the answer that comes through the heart, it's going to be quiet. Usually, sometimes it's loud, but usually it's much quieter than the mental clamor. The voice of the heart is generally quieter, softer, but when you get the answer of what you want, it feels good. Like when that answer bubbles up and it's just like, oh, yes, I really do want that.
And it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Second step to that, just I want to make sure I get this in there. Second step to that is make sure that you actually follow up and support yourself in taking care of whatever that need or want is.
Let yourself have it. Allow yourself to do that or be that or have that or
Like
Yes,
there's great power in that.
yes, I want this and I go get it. And I can make this happen myself. Like I can go do this. I can
Yeah,
make this happen. I can have this. It's okay. All of that.
yeah.
Okay, so what about the women who are out in the world wanting to be rock stars in the corporate world, whether they're running their own business or they're working with, a male dominated kind of corporation structure, and she's trying to make her way and, dealing with some of those dynamics. Do you have any thoughts about that beyond just like, I love this internal journey you're wanting people to take, because therein lies the power. And what is there other practical ways a woman can work within that and really stand strong with herself?
So a couple things. One, own your power and don't apologize for it. You
Yes.
know,
Speak,
um,
speak up in the meeting,
mhm.
right?
And
Excuse me.
don't let your ambitions override your need for self-care, because that's where your power lies. Like still going internal, still taking care of your needs, still making sure that you're a priority. Like I've met a lot of women in this world who are powerhouses who do not take good care of themselves in the way that is meaningful. Like they might go to the gym and work out for 2 hours at a time, but they're not doing it in a way that's actually nurturing and supportive. It's because I have to do this.
Right.
So your mindset around these things matter too. But yeah, I mean, when we own our power, when we stop apologizing for having power, that shifts quite a lot. But we have to make sure that we're always at the foundation of the equation. Our self-care, our needs are always at the foundation of the equation, because otherwise we burn ourselves out. We deal with, major sleep issues, health issues, chronic anxiety. And that is not a trade-off that's worth it.
No, cost is high, isn't it?
But if you're taking care of yourself and you're really making that a priority, you're so much stronger, you're so much more resilient, you're so much better able to show up.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, a piece that we forget. Like whether you're looking to be a corporate powerhouse in the government or just manage a family,
Mhm.
your self-care determines how well you show up and how much of a powerhouse you can be and how resilient you are and how successful you can be. So you always have to be the bottom line.
I love that. I think that's a great period to put on this subject. I love it. Self care is the bottom line. We always have to be the first choice in our lives, and that is not against anyone or any system. That is for everyone. I mean, the fact that that's true might be what lets women buy into it, actually. Oh, okay. Everybody's going to benefit if I'm nice to myself. Okay. All right, then maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll get to do it.
Yeah.
But the trajectory of all of this is changing. It is shifting, but we do see it too much still, for sure. We're working our way out of it, but it's still there. And wow. So, is there anything else you want to make sure our guests today, our listeners today, hear from you? Anything else you want to say about all of this before we wrap it up?
Two things is, one, like you deserve this, you are worth it.
Mm.
And the other thing is, don't be afraid to do the inner work. A lot of times we feel like when we go in and do that inner work, it's going to be that change, that transformation. The process is going to be too painful, too difficult, too overwhelming that we're just not going to be able to do it. I have never witnessed a woman go through their healing process and not come out better on the other side. It is truly the transformation of the butterfly.
It is.
And when you do your inner work and you allow yourself to grow, like you really do become the powerful, beautiful expression of your soul that you came here to be.
Absolutely. And that's available to anyone willing to do that work. It's absolutely there. One of the great gifts of our histories, our traumas, everything is that we can come out the other side better than ever.
Yeah.
Really, truly, it's available. We just have to believe it and then lean right into it and welcome it. And it can be scary. I totally get what you're saying. Trauma is not easy to deal with, but it can be dealt with. And what I have found over the years as a therapist and a coach is when trauma is really rearing its head, or we're really symptomatic in our lives, we're experiencing stress or even things we don't understand, is our history saying, I need you to pay attention now. It's time. You can handle it. I'm showing up because you can handle it, and I have gifts for you waiting. And
Yeah.
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you've been living with the pain and the symptoms and the difficulty of the trauma your entire life. Just think how much easier it's going to be because of what you've developed from that, how much easier it's going to be when you can resolve it and you don't have to live in that pain all the time.
Yes. And release it and find a peace with it that can come through sorting it out, processing it, and everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what a conversation this was, Linda. I think we could talk about this all day long, actually.
Probably.
Don't worry, everyone, we won't. But gosh, I feel like I think we rounded it out nicely. But it is a conversation that we want to keep having out there, right?
Yeah.
Everyone. And I thank you so very much for taking time out to be here with us today. You've just given us so much to think about and jewels and gems to take from this. I really, truly appreciate your expertise and your kindness and generosity. And everybody out there listening, share this episode if you found value in it, which I'm sure you did. And feel free to check out Linda Dieffenbach at wellnessinharmony.com. You can find all about her there. And if you want to reach out to her, I'm sure she's open to that. Anything else? Gosh.
No, just thank you so much for having me on. It's really been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I know it made a difference. So thank you so much. And I will talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Life Makeovers podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with those that you think would also benefit from what we're doing here. And I will talk to you again soon.